Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November MTA board meeting. Let's begin with the public speakers. Rob?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We have approximately 10 public speakers. The first speaker is Jermaine Lewis.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jermaine Lewis. I'm a current GCS employee. Unfortunately for me, I've had a very rough year. At the end of February, I fractured a bone in my foot. I was unable to go to work for a number of days. I called out sick for 2 days. I had people cover me and did day trades. I had gotten a call at home one day telling me that I had been out for 3 days, which would have been grounds for immediate termination. I was questioned as to when I was coming back, if I had a doctor's note, and if the doctor's note stated when I should be back at work. Because of my financial situation, I did have to go to work on a cast and crutches, and there were days when I had to walk the floor on a cast and crutches looking for a seat because the call center is so crowded and there were no seats available. I had another incident in August where I went to work. I was extremely sick. I was in a lot of pain. My shift ends at 5:30. About 3:30, I went to the manager on the floor and asked if I could leave. Her first question was, do you have enough sick hours to cover you for the remainder of the day? She didn't treat it seriously. She practically laughed in my face. She called another supervisor to question whether or not I had the hours to leave. When I left the call center, I called 911 and went to the emergency room where I was diagnosed with colitis. And when I was out for 2 days, I only had one sick day, and I was written up when I got back for calling out without a sick day. One of my other issues with GCS is the fact that I lost my ID. We're charged $100 for an ID that is issued by the MTA. Does the MTA charge GCS $100 for their ID? And if not, if it's less than that, why am I being charged that? In general, I'd like to say that we are not treated fairly. We are not paid an adequate salary. We don't have affordable health care. Health care for a single person is $150 a month. We don't have a
Ms. Lewis, please summarize your remarks.
Thank you. We're not given, again, we don't have a pension plan, and we're not treated fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Robert Brown.
Good morning, board. Chairman Pendergast. Every day the exploitation still continues on. Recently, we have a lion's share of our workers that's been there for over a year, but we have brand new people coming in straight out of training, not even working 90 days, that are doing supervisor work, that are not qualified to do supervisor work. It's a direct insult to the workers who put in a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of effort into this place, but yet because I have a family member working in management, I should not have to go through what the rest of the people go through. I get a chance to go up in line. The nepotism and favoritism is despicable. I recently talked to the management about it. I just emailed a letter asking them to at least do something about it, because it's a direct insult to the fellow workers on the floor who was working so hard to make sure we get the clients to their destination. And I just hope that somebody get an opportunity to do something about it, because it's definitely not fair to put in those many hours, those many years, and still be overlooked for special assignments. It should not go to brand new people in probation. And I think something should be done about that, the nepotism and favoritism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. The next speaker is Edwin Goodman.
Hi, my name is Edwin Guzman. I was here once. I was here 2 other times before. And from the first time I was here, I really did not even think that I would be going back to the MTA board meeting again and again. But once again, I'm here. I'm no longer with GCS. CWU and my co-workers, we're doing everything that we can to avoid a strike. I'm just really here waiting to see if there's any news from the MTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman. The next speaker is Christian Smith.
Thank you. My name is Christian. As I was here last month, nothing. It has been changed. I applaud you for keeping on them, but we've had situations where we've now lost almost 6 people in a weekend. And it's a thing when you're sitting there and you realize that they've built a machine off of hiring and firing, that we're nothing more than just gears in a machine. And if you're not well, or you need some help, or you need some assistance, that's too bad. You'll be replaced. You can be replaced. You will be replaced. And it's to the point where us as workers, we can't take no more. You sit there, they sit there, and if you are really sick, they're going to ask you if you had the sick time to cover it. Some things happen when that don't happen. If the train's delayed, they don't care. They will fire you, and just can't take it. They signed the contract to pay us one wage and decide to pay us another. And it's even hard to come into work. You have to slave just to work because of the wages that we're being paid. Taking shifts into the night, into where you're tired and you got to get up the next one and repeat it again and again and again. We can no longer abide by this. We can no longer do this. That's why we come here every month asking for assistance. Because the things that go on at that center are unfair and unjust practices you put your workers through. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Dylan Valley.
Good morning. I've been issued a statement from the president of the local, but before I do so, I'd like to thank you. The workers and the union organizers do see many MTA agents walking the floor and seems to be doing a thorough investigation, and we look forward to hearing the response to many of the questions that we've raised, particularly the question of whether or not GCS has breached their contract with the MTA. President Samuelson would like you to know that TW Local 100's Executive Board unanimously voted on November 10th to authorize a strike in response to the company's abject refusal to respect the basic rights of call center workers for more than 2 years. I met GCS's Chief Executive, Greg Alcorn, last week, and we started a dialogue. Based on that meeting, I believe there's a chance to improve the deplorable working conditions and reach a contract settlement. But if the dialogue breaks it off again, we will resume organizing and planning for a strike.
Thank you. The next speaker is Esther Mata.
Good morning. My name is Esther Mota. It's great to see you again. I feel like in the last 14 months after we voted in TWU, and we've been trying to build a contract with GCS that's beneficial for the agents and the clients that call in. We've gotten way farther in the last 3 months with you guys, so I greatly do appreciate that. I spoke with someone that used to work over at GCS, and I wish she was here to explain it. She worded it perfectly. It's not about the money. It's so much more about the respect. She left to another paratransit call center. And, you know, when people are in pain, you're going to the doctor, you're already ill, you have to wait for a vehicle for at least 30 minutes, and it's usually way over that. You know, it's abuse to them, and we have to hear it as well. And the way that she described it, where she went to now, she gets a break. You know, sometimes when we need to cry it out, when somebody's stuck in Staten Island in a wheelchair in a snowstorm by themselves and they're blind with no cell phone, you know, that hurts us. We take that home. Okay, some of those are our parents. Some of them could be us one day. You never know what can happen. You know, we want the respect so we can share it with our clients. Okay, the Paratransit Accessory Program is a blessing. For the last 25 years, I know a lot of people needed that service, and I'm very grateful that I can help in any little way. If I could drive a vehicle, I would. But I appreciate everything that you guys have done up to now, guys and ladies, to assist to make sure that GCS is actually abiding to this contract, the FOIL Act let us see that a lot of things that we are told don't seem to be represented in writing, and we feel like you should know that. And we would appreciate, a follow-up on that audit or follow-up on what's actually being done in the contract, because we really do feel left out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Mota. The next speaker is Keith Hodges.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. My name is Keith Hodges, here again with the agents, hoping you heard our cries, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're crying out for help. Imagine you having a job and there's an employer on the same block as you in the same industry. The difference is they only schedule trips for medical appointments. And Accessori, we schedule trips anywhere you want to go inside the 5 boroughs, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That employer pays their agents $15 to $16 an hour. Our employer chooses to only pay us $9 to $11 for 4 times the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. The next speaker is Charmaine Smith.
Good morning. I thank you for giving me this opportunity to present myself to you. I am one of the people that they talk about in the probationary period at GCS. Up until Sunday, I was recently employed by GCS. I was terminated for their 2 absence rule. I currently suffer from sciatic nerves. My absences were documented. My last absence occurred on October 20th. The fact that it took up until November 15th for you to decide to terminate me thus becomes a travesty, not to mention the fact that from the day of my absence up until November 15th, I had been present in GCS from anywhere to 10 to 12 hours. Those are the hours that I had been working, anywhere from 7 to 5:30 or 8 to 8. Those are the hours that I had been deemed necessary to work to provide for myself and my family, not realizing that they were unappreciated. Like Ms. Mota said, my customers need that service. My grandmother uses Accessori. My neighbor downstairs uses Accessori. Every day going to work, I pass one of the paratransit corporations. As someone who has a limited disability, but am still able to use the train, I understand the effect that Accessori has on New Yorkers, so I appreciate what it is that I do. But when I work for an employer that doesn't appreciate what I do for others, that becomes a travesty in the situation. So whether I get my job back or not, I just don't want other people to go through the same thing.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. The next speaker is Keisha McFadden.
Hello, my name is Keisha McFadden. It's good to see you guys again. The reason why it is good is because I'm looking for answers. I really thank you for coming through for the little things that made a difference to us, as such as coming in, spraying alcohol around so we don't get bit. Otherwise than that, I don't see what other people are saying. Right now, we need to strike. Because if we don't get an answer saying that GCS actually violated the contract, there's no reason why we should be working. We care about the elderly. We want to get them rides. We want to book them trips. We want to make sure that they're okay. But we cannot do that if we cannot take care of ourselves. And right now, we are not being taken care of whatsoever. I mean, management has their own personal reasons, their own attitudes. Each person is their own individual. But I will hold them responsible for the way we are being treated. We are being treated like We're gonna let y'all go tomorrow, doesn't matter, because we have a training class of 54 people that are gonna come out here and do the job that you do and think they can do it better and learn in 2-3 weeks and put them on the floor and let us go. We see employees being fired every single day. We're afraid just to say anything. We don't have any backup from our management down to the supervisors. There's no one there to assist us. So right now, we're asking you not only to show that GCS needs to show us good faith and treat us as human beings, as you all, everyone in here wants to be treated. I don't care what job you have. You want to be treated properly. And I was raised to give respect when respect is given to you. And I am holding my respect. And I shouldn't have to do that. Please look at the contract. Please let us know your decision today. We can no longer extend this. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden. The next speaker is Sandra Lennon.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Lennon. As you was told before that I helped build GCS, they fired me. I have one question. How close are you all to this investigation? Because I don't know how long these employees are going to be able to hold on. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rob. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the horrific attacks in Paris on Friday. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the entire city of Paris and everyone affected by these attacks. There have been no specific threats to our system related to these attacks, but we've nonetheless significantly stepped up our security efforts, increasing patrols and surveillance in order to provide heightened protection across all of our agencies. And I'd like to take this opportunity to once again remind our customers, if you see something, say something. They're well-guided words, they have good meaning, and they provide valuable information to us in the event you do see something. Please stay alert to your surroundings and report any suspicious activity to any MTA employee you may see. Do not err on the side of caution, just give us that information. Also today, with the attacks still fresh in our minds and in our hearts, and a week after Veterans Day, I'd like to hold a tribute of sorts to the freedom and the way of life we hold so near and dear to us in the U.S. and throughout Europe. To do that, I ask you to join me in honoring a veteran who fought for that freedom in World War II, and who today, at age 91, is one of the MTA's longest-serving active employees. Frank Guerrera joined the MTA on March 23, 1970, and has now been serving our organization with distinction for more than 45 years. His title is Car Maintainer B, but that does not really explain what he does. He's actually a highly skilled machinist who makes specialized train parts at our Coney Island maintenance shop. That means when an old part breaks down and the manufacturer isn't around anymore, we call Frank to make us a new part. And he usually makes it better than the one we had as an original one. He learned his skills serving in the Navy in World War II. He joined the U.S. Armed Forces when he was just 18 years old, serving as a seaman first class. And in 1944, he played an active role in the Allied invasion of southern France, then under German occupation. Frank's work ethic, his terrific attitude, and his dedication to his craft have been inspiring MTA employees for more than 45 years, and he is an extraordinary member of the MTA family. That's why now, as a small token of our appreciation, I'd like to present this plaque to Frank Guerrera for the service to the MTA and, more importantly, to his country. I'd now like to update you on an ongoing review of the MTA contractor that runs the Accessoride Call Center in Long Island City Global Contract Services. As you all know, at our last two board meetings, and once again this morning, many of our public speakers have been GCS employees. They described such poor working conditions that I directed New York City Transit Interim President Jim Ferrara to conduct a thorough review of the situation. This review includes an analysis of rates of pay, circumstances leading to and timing of employees' terminations, and overall working conditions at the call center facility itself. We have spoken to the leadership of GCS at the highest levels and continue to do so, and I am pleased to say they've been cooperative with the request for information we have made. I'm also pleased with the level of engagement by our staff, and I have spoken to you on a number of different occasions of the board who have expressed concern about this vital issue, and I thank you for your input and support. Nonetheless, there remain some additional questions and avenues that need to be explored before we consider this analysis complete. Therefore, I believe it would be premature to give a presentation today on the issue, but we will be back to you shortly. Time is of the essence. We heard from the speakers today the conditions under which they're working and the urgent need that they have to resolve these issues. One important data point, the employees of GCS who work at the call center have elected to join a union. You've heard many of them talk about it. That's TW Local 100. And many of those issues have been discussed at this board meeting, are part of the collective bargaining process. In the course of this review, we have spoken with the leadership of both GCS and TW Local 100 and have urgently impressed upon them the importance of their coming together to address these issues. I understand that those parties have resumed active collective bargaining and are continuing to do so. That's good news, but that's not the only news. We need to keep the focus on it, and we need to get back to you with the completion of our analysis while those negotiations continue. I will give you another more substantive update in the near future when the review is complete, and I cannot urge more importantly the urgency of the matter. Thank you very much. Toward the end of the meeting today, Bob Fran will give a presentation on our next capital financial plan, as we do every November, at which time we vote on that plan in December. As you know, this is a process that began in July with the mid-year review of our 2015 performance and look at the preliminary 2016 budget and financial plan. The minutes of the October's meeting have been distributed to all members. May I have a motion to move them? Second. Any comments, questions, or revisions to those? Mr. Merdler?
Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you and your colleagues for the excellent work you've done in pursuing this important issue concerning the call center. I do want the people who are here on behalf of TWU to understand that they are represented by probably the finest labor leader in the state of New York and elsewhere, and a man who knows what he's doing and gets it done. And we will be watching and cheering him on.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Committee on Finance, I chaired the Finance Committee this month. There are two procurement actions this month in the total amount of $20.2 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are two procurements totaling $20.2 million, and the committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. There are no ratifications. There are 4 real estate action items which are described on pages 36 through 45 in the board book distributed for this meeting, and the committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them. Any comments or questions? Mr. Bellin?
I abstained from 1A, the 127th Street property.
So noted. May I have a vote? All in favor? Aye. That concludes the Finance Committee report. Now a report from the Transit Committee by its chairman, Mr. Ferrer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Transit and Bus Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one action item. The action item approves the energy audits for the New York City Transit Department of Subways maintenance facilities utilizing the services of the New York Power Authority consistent with the MTA NYPA Energy Services Program agreement approved by the board in December 2005. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions, Mr. Bellin?
Consistent with what I did at committee, I recuse from this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 7 procurement actions in the total amount of $199 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 5 competitive procurements in the total amount of $193.4 million for New York City Transit. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And
There are-
I'm sorry.
I vote to oppose the bus procurement, Nova and New Flyer.
So noted.
There are 2 ratifications in the amount of $5.3 million for MTA capital construction. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. And that concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report.
The Metro North Railroad and Long Island Railroad Committees met jointly this month. The report from Long Island Railroad Committee Chairman Mitch Pally.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committees met jointly and report the following. There are 10 procurement actions in the total amount of $22 million. Of those, there are 2 non-competitive procurements for Metro North Railroad in the total amount of $1.2 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are 7 competitive procurements, 4 for Metro North Railroad and 3 for Long Island Railroad, in the total amount of $16 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There is 1 ratification for MTA capital construction for $4.3 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
And this concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Pally. We'll now hear from the Bridge and Tunnels Committee and its Chairman, Alan Capelli.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Bridges and Tunnels Committee met this month and report the following. There are 2 procurement actions this month in the total amount of $782,000. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 2 competitive procurements in the amount of $782,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are no ratifications. This concludes Bridges and Tunnels report.
Thank you, Mr. Capelli. Now ask the MTA's Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Bob Ferrand, who will present the November financial plan, update us on this financial plan and the final proposed 2016 budget. We will take no action on this plan as we normally do. We do not normally take action on this plan in November. It's for information and discussion only, and we will vote on the financial plan in December. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in front of you the November financial plan. It includes both the 2015 November forecast, the 2016 final proposed budget, and a financial plan for the years 2016 through 2019. As in the past, this plan has been developed in a disciplined, consistent, and transparent manner. Let's start the discussion this morning by first looking at the July plan. Now, as a reminder, we maintain our books and records on a GAAP basis. However, by statute, we balance our books each year on a self-sustaining basis, which basically means that we can take cash that's left over at the end of the year and use it to offset expenses in the following year. The July plan projected favorable cash balances through 2017 with deficits of $175 million in 2018 and 2019 of about $224 million. Now again, just to point out, the projected cash balance in 2016 of $165 million is rolled forward to address expenses in 2017. Obviously, expenses in 2017 are greater than revenues in 2016, which is the reason that the cash balance declines to $102 million. And then that cash balance of $102 million in 2017 is rolled forward to offset a deficit that would be about $277 million if we had no cash balance available. But again, we've now reduced that. In July, we were projecting to $175 million. The July plan was based on 3 key interrelated elements that are really fundamental to all of the plans that we put forward. First, there's biennial fare and toll increases of approximately 4% that we're projecting in 2017 and 2019. That's effectively the rate of inflation of 2% a year. It'll give us annualized increases of about $311 million and $328 million, respectively. We're increasing our annual cost reduction targets. Now, this year, we will achieve more than our target of $1.3 billion of annually recurring cost reductions. The target for next year is slightly more than $1.5 billion, and our target for 2019 is almost $1.8 billion. The July plan also increased the support, MTA funded support for the capital program. We had pay-as-you-go contributions of $125 million annually. We had additional one-shot contribution in this year of $75 million. And together that enabled us to put on the table for the 15 to 19 capital plan an additional $2.4 billion between what we could fund through bonds and what we would continue to fund on pay-as-you-go capital. The July plan also funded service and service quality and service support investments totaling $183 million over the plan period, and increased O&M and enterprise asset management investments of over $280 million during the plan period. So what's changed since the July plan? Well, there's been favorable changes and things that have gone against us. On the favorable side, we've had higher real estate transaction tax receipts. We're projecting now $240 million of additional resources during the plan period. We have higher toll revenues. We're projecting about $93 million over the plan period. Lower energy cost, a benefit of about $190 million during the plan period, and lower debt service cost of about $109 million over the plan period. Changes or reestimates worsening the financial results, lower petroleum business tax forecast. That's negative $124 million over the period. Lower MTA aid forecast of about $68 million. And let me just stop there. The MTA aid is what I call the dogs and cats, the different revenues that we received at the time that the legislature passed the payroll mobility tax. It includes a motor vehicle registration fee. It includes learner's permit fees on auto licenses, an auto rental charge, and also a surcharge, the 50-cent drop charge on medallion cabs. Now, we're projecting about $68 million less in revenue from the MTA aid. And the bulk of that is coming from the medallion 50-cent drop surcharge. And if you're aware, what's happening right now is with the app-based livery services, that's the Uber and Lyft, they do not pay the 50-cent drop fee. They pay a sales tax, as many of the black cars do as well, but we don't get that 50-cent drop fee. We're seeing and estimating a significant drop in the number of medallion cab pickups that are taking place. What seems to be happening is in Manhattan, Uber and Lyft are taking market share away from the medallion cabs, and in the outer boroughs we're seeing an increase in overall pickup. But to put this in perspective, an Uber or Lyft app ride would have to be about $133 fare at the 3/8%, which we receive out of the sales tax, to equate to a 50-cent drop charge. There aren't a lot of $133 fares that are being picked up, I'm sure, by Uber and Lyft. So it's something that we're going to have to address. Additionally, we have lower fare box revenues. And it's not that ridership is down. This is merely, I think, we were too aggressive, too optimistic in projecting in the July plan. So that's about $31 million. When you put all these things together, we have an additional resources during the plan period of about $447 million through 2019. So let's look at the November plan and the highlights of that plan. We're continuing to project 4% fare and toll increases in 2017 and 2019. Again, roughly 2% a year, approximating inflation. We're adding additional service and service quality investments of $95 million over the plan period, additional O&M investments of $147 million, additional enterprise asset management funding of $157 million. We're increasing the annually recurring savings targets that we had built into the July plan, which were $25 million in 2017, $50 million in 2018, and $75 million in 2019, by $25 million in each of those years. So we're increasing our target over last year by $100 million by the time you get to 2019. We're also accelerating pay-as-you-go funding by $300 million. We had built that into roughly 2018. We're able to pull it forward. This is important because without Capital Program Review Board approval authorizing the bonds that we expect to sell for the next program, we can't commit against contracts with those monies. The only thing we can commit to are non-bond issues using our own monies, such as pay-as-you-go. So this will give us the ability to let contracts until the Capital Program Review Board approves it, which we expect to happen, early next year. And at the same time, it will enable us to avoid debt service of about $18 million a year for 3 years, so saving us $54 million during this period. As you probably recall, we have a general reserve fund built into our budget equal to 1% of our operating expenses. We have not needed that money this year, and so what we are recommending is, as in the past, that we take that money and invest it into the Long Island Railroad Additional Pension Plan. That's our lowest funded pension plan. By putting this money in, it will save us about $14 million a year, and it will also help raise that funding level from what was roughly 23% funded several years ago, now to almost 56% funded. It's a very worthwhile investment. It's an obligation that we all have that we need to fund, and so I think this is an appropriate use of those funds. Now, with all of those investments being made, we have a financial plan that's balanced through 2018, with the 2019 deficit reduced to $182 million. Let's quickly look at some of these investments that we've made. The November plan maintains the $183 million in service and service quality investments we proposed in July and adds an additional $95 million. The July plan was the investments were to mitigate subway delays, expand select bus service, address platform budget guidelines, and to improve on-time performance and customer service. In the November plan, we'll do additional platform budget service adjustments of $38 million. We're adding $13 million for select bus service, and $26 million is being invested into Easy Pass Customer Center all-electronic tolling pilot program for the Rockaway. The November plan invests an additional $147 million in O&M expenses. $35 million will go to the 2nd Avenue subway for maintenance needs for station and power division. $42 million New York City Transit for structure and third rail defect reduction. It's double the rate of repairs. $21 million by Long Island Railroad for the M7 reliability-centered maintenance to replace threshold plates that are experiencing an unusual rate of corrosion. And an important initiative is enterprise asset management. The MTA is working to overhaul its entire asset management system in line with federal requirements and international best practices. Money was included in the July plan, but we've just recently completed a gap analysis, which has helped us to redefine our priorities. And so we'll be adding an additional $43 million roughly a year during the plan period. Enterprise asset management is going to help us to upgrade and integrate our systems to capture full life cycle cost on all of our assets, standardize our asset management, systematize the documentation of asset conditions, improve our work order management, streamline material management, and develop organizational trainings, issues which will enable us to take this process, this procedure, and internalize it so that it's something that we'll be able to use going forward as business as usual. Now, I think one of the most important things for the credibility of the MTA is to be able to demonstrate to our funding partners and to our customers that we are doing everything within our power to try to keep our cost as low as possible and generate the maximum amount of funding available to serve our customers. and to keep our fares low if possible, and also to minimize the amount of subsidies that we require. This chart shows the savings targets as of each November plan in the past. In 2010, we started this program, and in that year, our savings target for annually recurring savings was $400 million a year. It increased to about $700 million in 2011, and each year, as you can see, it's increased further. The solid lines are what we have achieved from each of those plans, and the dashed lines are what the targets are for each year going forward. So, as you can see, the light blue was the 2012 November plan, where we were projecting in 2016 that we were hoping to achieve slightly more than $1.2 billion. By the blue line at the top dashed, you can see that through that plan, we had increased the target to almost $1.5 billion, and now as you go all the way to 2019, you can see that our target has further increased to almost $1.8 billion. Now, when we establish these targets, we don't necessarily know exactly how we're going to achieve those savings. We put the target out there, and the goal is to meet it. So what this next chart shows, by the height of the bar, is the amount of unidentified savings targets as of last November. So last November, we were projecting in 2016 that roughly we would have about $172 million of savings. Since last November, we have identified, as indicated by the shaded yellow part, $69 million of new initiatives that we have either put in place or will be putting in place to achieve savings. So the as of yet unidentified amount for next year is $73 million. And as you can see, those unidentified are continuing to be addressed. Now, across the bottom in the blue solid box is the amount of new targets that we put in place since last November. Just move to the far right side. You can see what we had identified as, what we said in terms of additional targets. We've identified 126 million and have implemented some of those, but yet we still have 182 million to go. Now, of that 126 that we've identified, it's made up by a number of different initiatives. We do track these things, we've categorized them, and there's about 51 categories of initiatives. The biggest items that we put in place was additional cost savings on paratransit. That was about $47 million. IT consolidation is giving us about $16 million we project. New York City Transit and MTA Bus rebid their prescription drug program, and that's saving about $16 million a year. The pension savings that I mentioned earlier is $14 million a year. Insurance efficiencies, we're picking up about $10 million a year. And then New York City Transit timekeeping consolidation is giving us about $5 million a year. Now, that still leaves about $18 or $19 million of initiatives, and they really represent probably 40 different categories of expenses. So you can see that what we're talking about is a lot of smaller dollar savings initiatives. And I think what that really does is it shows the effectiveness that our agencies are demonstrating in terms of cutting costs. We're seeing items that are $100,000, we're seeing $250,000 of savings, we're seeing $500,000 savings. In other words, they're looking to pick up savings wherever they can. It's not just big dollar items, it's small dollar items that are, when aggregated, are meaningful. And I do think, again, it demonstrates what the agencies are really doing on a day-to-day basis. So, where are we? Well, even with the additional necessary investments in service quality, O&M, and enterprise asset management, we're still able to eliminate the 2018 deficit and eliminate it completely, have a cash balance, and then reduce the 2019 deficit down to $182 million. Now, lest I leave you with an idea that this is a very rosy picture and everything is just going to move forward and be fine, let me just put some risk on the table that show on a relative basis what we're looking at. 2 charts earlier, I showed you the yet unidentified savings targets that we have. Things that we've got to find out how we are going to reduce cost and what we'll do. If you take those unidentified savings targets and say that we can't achieve them, again, we don't know what they are. So if we do not achieve those savings targets, you start to see a very different picture. The cash balance in 2016 goes from $123 million down to $51 million. And remember, that cash balance gets rolled forward and helps to offset cost in the next year. Well, obviously, without the savings targets by 2017, we're projecting a deficit of $152 million. In 2018, the forecast now projects a deficit of $145. And in 2019, without those unidentified saving targets being achieved, our deficit is $420 million. But there's something else. We built into the budget, into the forecast, roughly inflation-based fare and toll increases in each year. So a 4% in 2017 and another 4% in 2019. Again, this is roughly inflation-based fare and toll increases. If we don't get inflation-based fare and toll increases in those 2 years, you can see what the numbers look like. We're up to a $403 million deficit in 2017, and by the time you get to 2019, it's almost a $1 billion deficit. Just those 2 things right there, not hitting the unidentified savings targets and not having an inflation-based fare and toll increase, changes the picture dramatically. I haven't talked about labor, I haven't talked about the economy, and I haven't talked about where interest rates are going. There's a lot of things that could happen out there. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to be reasonable in our projections, but let you know that there are still significant risk out there, and we have to maintain our focus. Which really brings us to what we talk about every time. What's ahead of us? What are the issues that we're going to have to address? And again, we really do need inflation-based fare and toll increases. And I think the biennial fare and toll increases are what we need to do. It lets people know what our plans are. It also tells people what our commitment is to them to try to live within an envelope that's reasonable, and we'll do it. We've got to continue for efficiencies and consolidations to reduce our annually recurring cost. We have funding commitments from the state and we have funding commitments from the city, and we're greatly appreciative of those, but the actual financial arrangement are yet to be determined. We expect that we'll receive the funding, but how it happens will still be subject to subsequent negotiations. We have some chronic looming costs that have to be addressed. The first 2, workers' compensation and claims, are a major issue for us. Over the last 6 years, our liability for those have almost doubled to $2.5 billion. We are putting measures in place. It's incident prevention, it's better case management, fraud detection. All of these things are underway, but more work still has to be done. Overtime is something we continue to look at. The Cadillac tax from the Affordable Care Act, if you recall, we talked about it in July. Basically, if the health care benefits that we're providing to our employees exceed a certain threshold by 2018, the difference between the value of those benefits and whatever is a number, a baseline number that the federal government established, that difference, we would owe 40% of that as an excise tax. We estimate that in 2018 that could be $30 million a year, and that by 2022 it could be $130 million a year. It's significant dollars. We have to address this loss of revenues from the app-based delivery services. The 50 cents is an important amount, and it's got to be addressed. We want to continue to maintain discipline to try to use one-shot revenues as they come in to generate ongoing, recurring savings. And that could be putting it into an unfunded pension plan, it could be putting it into our OPEBs, it could be using it to avoid debt by putting it into the capital program. We project interest rates for our capital-intensive capital program, debt-intensive capital program, based on what we see in the marketplace for future interest rates. But even being conservative as we are, we don't know what rates are going to be over the next 5 years. And if interest rates exceed our projections and the projections that we built into the plan, that's a risk for us, and it's something that we're going to have to accommodate because we can't cut our capital program back. So that's where we are today. Again, this will be presented to you in December. At that time, you will vote on it. We're always happy to answer any questions you have at this meeting or individually. You can call us over the phone. But, Mr. Chairman, I turn it back to you.
Any comments or questions? It's a lengthy presentation. We've been here before, so now's the time to have the discussion. Carl? Please use your mic, Carl.
It's not often I get to use it. These initiatives, the savings initiatives that we're talking about to take in your bar charts over like 3 or 4 years, when you achieve the first one, you jump ahead and increase that. Now, if you work so hard to make that first bar chart, that what you said you were going to save through the savings initiatives, why is it that you can go and find more savings when you should have found it the first year?
Yeah, what?
I know that it's complex and there are a lot of things that enter into your how you determine that. But once you get to a certain point, say cutting employees, all right, that's a savings to me, how I would think it. But every time that you do that, you're cutting back on services or something else. I know we get increases yearly from contributions and our tolls we increase and things like that. But that's not a savings when you increase a toll by 50 cents or something. It's, you're adding to your expenses. But how do you keep going and saying, I'm going to save more money this year, 69 million, 106 million, 118 million? If you made the 69, I think that's monumental.
Yep.
But how do you double it the next year? You found more savings.
That's really what's going on. There's two ways of looking at this. This is actually cutting expenditures and it's reducing growth of expenses. Those are two things that are very important. Paratransit, I'll give you the example of paratransit. Paratransit was growing at 18% a year back in 2008, 2009. We've now got paratransit growth reduced to about 6.5% a year. The dollars are huge, so that's one of the things that's happening. The second thing is we're talking about recurring savings. Now, we will take one-shot savings when we can get them, and that's things like inventory management. If we can reduce our inventory, we can get a one-shot savings that we don't have to spend. But what we're really looking for is annually recurring cost reductions or programmatic things that can reduce the growth of our expenses. So if we can achieve the $69 million that you see up there for, in 2016, that's built into the base, and then it's just additional changes. The board has asked, and you've asked, Carl, in the past, are we seeing, is it getting harder to reduce cost? Well, you know what? The low-hanging fruit was taken early, but there's still things that we can do. When we look at workers' compensation, when we look at claims, I think we have room to save money there, additional monies. But we're not going to be able to continue to cut and cut and cut, necessarily. It is getting harder. But what we're committed to do is just that. And that's why I was saying what I'm really pleased with is what you see at the agencies where we're seeing $100,000 cost savings, or we're seeing $250,000 cost savings, or we're seeing $500,000, because that's what it takes.
Bob, I understand that, but when you say that you're going to have the next year $106 million, and that's an increase, and you cut it back to $100,000, you're calling that a decrease, you're a savings. But you're not really, because that $100,000 you're spending. In other words, it should carry over. It shouldn't keep rising, the costs, without...
Well, our operating budgets go up every year.
I understand that. But when they don't go up as much, we're losing money. So how do you have a savings when everything is costing more? When you do your labor negotiations, it's always going to cost you more.
Let me try to explain it, Bob. Let me try to explain it. There has to be healthy tension in an organization for it to be continually looking at all of the cost structure, all of its operating expenses that drive costs. And the healthy tension has to be driven by a target being given to people to say that you have to achieve. And the general rule of thumb here is for $100 million worth of savings, given the nature of the services we provide and the employees, about two-thirds of those cost reductions come out of New York City Transit because of its size. So when I was senior vice president of the subways, when I was president of the organization, I had a target to hit. And so what you look at is you take a look at, some people call it zero-based budgeting, that was the Carter administration, but you take a look at your cost structure, and you have some services you're providing, some employee expenses, some operating and maintenance costs, which were a need 20 years ago, which may not be a need today. And so you look at that and you say, do you really need to be doing that service? Are you getting the quality out of it? And you identify those targets. What Bob said is at the front end of this, when I came back here in 2009, December 1st, 6 years ago now, we were looking at big ore veins, millions of dollars at one fell swoop. Now it's smaller ore veins, $250,000 a cut. But that healthy tension is there. And that's why you saw on the one chart where you saw that curve keep getting increased. He's asking that targets to go higher and higher. It's getting more difficult to hit those targets, and the ore veins are getting smaller. But if you don't keep that pressure in the organization, you just assume costs and loaded overhead structure that you don't really need. And I think Bob stated it well in the sense that before you ask a person to go into their pocket and pay more, you have to demonstrate you're getting as much out of it. So, I mean, the agency heads could articulate it, but it'd be along the same lines that I did. And if you're not given that target, there won't be that pressure there.
So what you're saying is that the next year, we know everything is going to go up by a certain percentage. So if we can cut that percentage, we'll have a savings. In reality.
There is a cost growth reduction, and paratransit is the best example of that. And then there's just things that we're able to cut because when we do consolidations, this year we've consolidated IT, we've consolidated Treasury, and we're consolidating certain aspects of our procurement. In doing those things, we're able to reduce headcount, which are permanent reductions.
Okay. Yeah,
so there are permanent reductions, and then there's growth reductions. So.
I'll have a private talk with you. Okay. It's better to keep the meeting going. Thank you.
Mr. Capelli? I think you were raising your hand.
I continue to be year by year impressed by the diligence and the work that goes into this. Having 6 years ago dealt with the abyss-based budget and having climbed out of it, I do marvel at the savings that you have achieved, or you've helped achieve, and both of you in your various positions, but Bob as the Chief Financial Officer in our organization. It's probably one of the most unsung things that the MTA has done, and to add a critical note, it's something that we need to do better, because as the chairman correctly points out, as we ask people to pay more, there is a misconception that no effort is made to reduce costs, and that's certainly not the truth. So I would ask our publicity people and whatnot to get on the stick here and get out and tell the story to the editorial boards and to the consumers as to what we do to try to hold the line on costs. I have just a couple of concerns with this overall budget, and my traditional concern is service-related, and I say that money has been built into the service. I'm not sure that there's enough in some of the, what I would call, or what the City Council called, transit deserts around, primarily money for increased bus service, and I would hope that we continue the effort to try to find monies to beef up that. I think that select bus service is also something that we need to work with the city towards getting more of that up and running, because it helps move lots of people much more quickly, and is one of the few things that we can do effectively in a congested city. I am a little concerned about the reliance upon the 4% biannually, particularly in the area of tolls, and that's a annual concern that I raise. I'm not sure when we're going to get to the point when people are going to storm the doors, so to speak, but it's pretty close, and had been my hope that the legislature would adopt a fairer toll structure that would have solved a lot of problems, and perhaps at some point maybe we'll get back to that and be able to get money to help fund some of these things, fix the roads, and adopt a Move New York-like plan to also relieve congestion. And lastly, on a specific comment, the $43 million annually for the enterprise asset management. It just seems like a lot of money to me. And if I could get an explanation offline, or if you got a quick one as to what actually goes into $43 million on a annual basis, I would appreciate that.
We'll give you a presentation. It's a concern. I'll just give you a 100,000-foot explanation. You've heard the number. The size of the asset is $1 trillion. $1 trillion is the MTA asset. So when we put together capital programs that are now approaching $28, $29, $30 billion, the ability for us to make sure that we're appropriate balance between operating dollars to maintain, inspect and maintain an asset and get its useful life, and extend its useful life to the point we don't have to replace it, is key. And if you take a look at comparable organizations in the private sector, and the comparable organizations in the private sector would be Class 1 railroads, in terms of, because they're making decisions with respect to how they finance their capital plans based upon what part of their profits they're using in that. And they're aggressively pursuing enterprise asset management systems. Bob's concern is that we don't make expenditures and don't see a realized benefit in terms of those expenditures, in terms of the systems we're putting in and the return on the investment. So it is a concern, but it's a focused concern that we're keeping our eye on.
Thank you. And again, my overall comment is, good job, Bob.
Any further comments? Mr. Ferrer?
Mr. Chairman, isn't there an expectation of savings with the more efficient management of our assets?
Yes. I mean, to me, enterprise asset management is supposed to result in decreased capital cost, for the same assets that we can put in place. As has been alluded, if we can get an extra year out of service out of an asset, it means we don't have to spend the dollar. It means we don't have to sell debt and have debt service. So to me, all of these investments really should be justified in either increased efficiency or absolute reduction in cost, or greater delivery of whatever the benefit is, which all really does come back to we should be saving money net for the organization.
Mr. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of questions. We can reserve the answers offline, but the fact that there's just such a short time frame between this meeting and the next meeting when the board has to act on a financial plan, I just think, so one is I just want to better understand if the MTA does, or if it doesn't do it, why hasn't it thought about doing it? Or maybe you have and there's an answer. Just setting spending targets across the board, and agencies all know, all divisions know, that you're going to have to live within a certain spending restraint. State's done it over the last 5 or 6 years, where everybody understands whether it's 0% increases or 2% increases, they have to find savings, and if that means you don't do business the way you used to do it, you eliminate things, you consolidate, you merge things, but the bottom line is that it's not about always finding ways to generate revenue. You have to control spending. If you don't control spending long term, you're going to always have budgetary problems. And one of the ways the state was able to figure out how to address some of its budgetary problems that was systemic, and you were sort of like on a roller coaster ride, is to get spending under control. So I just want to get a better understanding, because one of the things I was a little confused about is, and we can talk about it offline again, is the logic between creating a savings target and then trying to figure out a way to back into it, because you set a number, but you haven't identified how you're going to get to that number. And so to me, partly, is the number arbitrary? Is it the number based on backing into an overall global number? But I just want to understand that kind of premise versus just letting all the agencies know, all the divisions know that, for the, you got to live within a 2% growth, you have to live within a 1% growth, and you're going to have to spend the whole year coming up with savings efficiencies or a new model on how you live within, that spending constraint. Because while I admire that paratransit's gone down from 18% to 6.5%, 6.5% growth when inflation's 1, 2, or you have deflation is still unsustainable. And the other thing I would ask, Mr. Chairman, I think it's incumbent on us, the MTA, as an organization, that I think our riders are willing to pay their fair share. They just want to see what they're getting for their service. So when we raise fares, there's a date certain when those fares go up. So I would just somehow want to see parallel to seeing a fare increase, that our ridership, whether it's a commuter rail, it's New York City, transit, they see what they're going to get in 2016 for that 2% increase. Here is what your expectation is in terms of improved customer service, whatever other station improvements, whatever's going to come, that there's going to be a date certain that you're going to see these improvements and changes, just like there's a date certain when your fares are going to go up. And, I'm looking forward to working with you and everyone else. I think we can't be all things to all people. We got to really further refine who we are, what we want to be, and live within that box, so to speak. But I just want to make sure that while we're, looking to ask riders to pay more, and, 2% is not necessarily unreasonable, no one wants to see any fares go up. Trust me. Nobody on this board wants to ever vote for a fare increase. People in Albany don't want to see a fare increase, whether it's a toll fare increase or a subway or train fare increase. But if we have to do it, then we need to take accountability to show the users of our system what they're getting for their money, both on a performance basis and also on a customer service basis. And I think we have an obligation to lay that out so that the public understands what they're going to get in return for any additional ask of them. Thank you.
Any further comments? If not, I believe that concludes the business of the meeting. We do not have an executive session. We thought we were going to, but we do not. So that concludes the business of the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Tom, you mentioned at the outset concerns about what happened in Paris. On a security side here, is there anything whatsoever that's different from the usual see something, say something? Is there any sort of tactical change based on what you saw unfold in Paris?
No, I believe what we constantly remind somebody, there's a lot in those two words. If you see something, say something. Don't assume that it may be nothing. Turn it over to somebody who could decipher that intelligence and make an informed decision as to whether it is or not. And when we're on a heightened sense of awareness on a national level, we remind people on a local level to do the same. Because in the history of terrorism as we know it, transportation facilities have been targets.
The Uber, I'm sure I just missed the number, but what are the estimates for how much the growth of Uber is hitting the MTA's coffers?
Bob Ferran? Question in terms of the specific number of the erosion caused by Uber right now. Well, what was that number? It's a number you may not want to hang on today because it will change over time as Uber becomes more part of the culture and people use it.
We see about $10 million a year as of right now. And again, that's based on, period to period, not a full last year versus a full this year, but for a period that we then annualize. So all we can really tell is it seems that market share is coming away from the medallion cabs, going to the app-based services. We were hoping that the whole pie would grow and that we would end up being held harmless, but that doesn't seem to be happening. It appears that maybe the whole pie is getting larger, but the market share erosion detriment to the medallion cabs.
So that's a $10 million loss per year. Okay, and is there anything you think the state should be doing about that?
Whenever you look at the issue of revenues from taxes and excises, it affects many people. So it's being looked at. It is definitely being looked at. More, and it's not just in relation to the MTA, and because there are other taxes and excises affect other people. So it's being looked at in its totality.
Just as a follow-up question to that, what would be the process to, for the TLC and the state to take that 50% charge and put that on all Ubers and Lyfts and black cars?
It'd be part of a legislative process, which I'll let others opine on. They have much more expertise on that than I do.
Council had that hearing on transit deserts. Where do you fall on the idea to allow riders in the city to ride Metro North or LIRR for a transit fare? And what other kind of creative ideas immediately to address crowding and stuff or service is the MTA looking at or could be looking at?
There are at least three extremely important things the board of the MTA does. One is just to effectively award procurements. The second is determine service levels, and the third is to set fare policy. They do other things, but those are the three most important. Under the issue of fare policy, what do we charge customers for the services we provide? That is an example of one that we need to look at. There are other fare issues that we need to look at in terms of discounts, rides for veterans. We put those all together, and generally in concert with the next scheduled discussion on a fare change, we get alignment between any potential changes in fare policy. The issue of a freedom ticket, city ticket, has been around for a while. The expansion of it in terms of geography and also scope is going to be looked at. So it needs to be looked at not by itself, but in concert with all the other fare policy changes that may affect revenue. And then the board makes an informed decision with respect to which changes should be made and how would they be accommodated for. So, and it's one that there's been an ongoing dialogue between the city, public rider groups, et cetera, about the importance of it, especially for those parts of the city that don't have ready access to the subway system.
What's the latest on the Capital Program Review Board? Have you submitted the plan to them?
No, we haven't submitted the plan. When we submit the plan the next time, they have 30 days to take action. We want to make sure that there are no outstanding issues that would put us in a position where one of the members could veto it. So that dialogue's going on, and there's concerns raised. I mean, early on there were concerns raised by the Senate Republican Conference about highway funding across the state. And then the more recent discussion is what's in it for Second Avenue. And so we need to resolve those issues in a timely way and then resubmit the plan.
What does that look like?
As soon as possible, those discussions are ongoing because we need to get an approved plan so we can award contracts, and that's what Bob Prant talked about in his presentation.
So are you, on the CPRB issue and the capital plan issue, are you leaving open the possibility of a revised plan before you send it to the CPRB with some sort of additional commitments towards the Second Avenue project? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. First of all, we have a revised plan that's been approved by the board.
Yeah.
There is a dialogue ongoing with the principals, and the CPRB individuals represent groups. You've got a representative from the Assembly, representative from the Senate, representative from New York State DOT, and a representative from the city, making sure that any outstanding questions they have with respect to that revised plan are answered. Hopefully satisfactory so you don't need to revise it again and come back to the board. So that's where those discussions are, and we believe we can get there.
And a follow-up on the drop tax. Well, can we have Kate had actually too, she had a follow-up.
Let him have another one.
So, just didn't know if you, I just didn't know if you could give us some examples on the potential solutions to solve the decline in taxi drop tax receipts by the MTA. What are some of the, or Bob could tell us?
First of all, we need to have a discussion along the lines Bob talked about is what's happening, what do we think the long-term impacts are, how will it affect a number of people, not just us, because there are other people that depend on those revenue streams, and then let it be part of the legislative process. That's the most I can say, because that is the process that we follow. And I'm not an expert on the legislative process.
I wanted to ask about the November financial plan with millions of dollars in cuts or spending target reduction targets, fare hikes. I wanted to ask about this platform service adjustments. I know this is something the MTA does, but considering the cuts and the raises in fares, is this just a reshuffling of the decks, or do you plan to actually add substantial service to subways so that, you know, my 9 p.m. A train doesn't feel like a 8 a.m. rush hour train?
Well, first of all, I'm not exactly sure how we got to a point of calling it platform, because it confuses people. They think of a subway platform, but it's really like a platform, a floor. We have service guidelines at each one of the agencies, and the service guidelines say that for certain loading, and then when you apply those factors in terms of actually scheduling trains, you're providing for a level of service that meets these standard guidelines, comfort range, et cetera. And those, as long as the agencies stay within those guidelines, you don't have to come back for formal board approval, versus like we're going to add a route somewhere new that's never been there before. You'd have to come back to the board. So, but in the budget process, we need to estimate what we think those platform adjustments are going to be on a system that is growing in ridership on a daily basis. So that reflects the numbers that we expect the platform adjustments to have to accommodate for as ridership is flocking to the system, to commuter rails, buses, less buses, commuter rail, and subways.
To follow up, I mean, do you feel, though, that the guidelines are actually matching the customer experience on the ground when they're just, it feels like rush hour on the weekends, late at night, even sometimes in the middle of the day? What's your take on your guidelines on paper and what the rider experience is?
The guidelines are set up for rush hour service. If you've heard Bill Wheeler talk over the past 20 years where we've seen the demographic change, while we're seeing increased ridership in rush hours, where we're really seeing increased ridership are weekends and nights. We carry more people on a weekend day than we carried on a weekday when I was senior vice president of the subways in 1993. We used to carry 3.5 million people a day on a weekday. We're now carrying more than that on a weekend. So the ridership growth has occurred there. The likelihood of a person getting a seat on a subway train is different today than it was 20 years ago. Maybe about the same in rush hour, but the crowded conditions on the really, really crowded lines are much higher. But a lot of you folks ride weekends and nights, and it's very common for you to see a fully loaded train and a lot of standees on weekends and nights.
With winter coming up, this is a timely question I'm going to ask. This pending capital plan, what do you hope to accomplish in terms of further resilience and hardening of the system?
A lot of effort was put in terms of the expenditure of the Sandy monies to be able to deal with resiliency and hardening, but we've extended that in terms of the changing design guidelines. I mean, the one example I always use, I mean, now on under-river tunnels, we specify a submarine cable. What does that mean? Not a cable in a submarine. A cable that you expect will be underwater at some times in its useful life. So we do things like that. We will raise the location of critical facilities where we know the floods may, in a 50 or 100-year period, come close to that. So those types of things. But those are part of the integral design process of capital program going forward.
Hey, going back to 2nd Avenue Subway, you said you would try to accelerate the process if possible. What is the likelihood in your mind of starting the tunneling during this plan? And do you think that you should have met with some of those legislators beforehand and sort of gotten them on board before it was included at last month's meeting?
Well, the only way we can, have a likelihood of being able to start early is keep the pressure on the organization. So the $535 million that's in the plan right now is for the revision of the environmental assessment that needs to be done, acquisition of property so we could advance construction, and utility relocation, which is key. You've got to move utilities away from where you're going to cut a hole in the street. And do that as aggressively as possible, and then keep gauging the degree of our ability to do that. Because if you can't get the utility relocation done, it doesn't make sense to award a contract that's waiting on that to happen. And the other dynamic that was in play is when you're starting to ask people for the state $8.3 billion, the city $2.5 billion, some of which they're going to have to finance, not just give you cash, there was a very strong, it was closer to a tell than an ask, that don't be asking for money that you can't be sure you're going to spend if we've got to float the debt finance for it. So we're going to look at that very carefully, aggressively push to get all that work done, especially the utility relocation. And if we're in a place in the term of this program that we can advance the construction, we would do that. And we're going to keep that dialogue with the stakeholders that are concerned about that. One thing that I think we need to, hindsight's 2010, 25, it's not 2020. You look back on something, it looks a lot clearer, and we need to be able to articulate better. Is there some people who think that north of 96th Street is the same as the benefit of south of 96th Street? Not necessarily. Certainly the Upper East Siders get a benefit, but as you start to go into East Harlem, and as you start to offload an even greater number of people off the Lexington Avenue line, the benefiters, directly and indirectly, of the second phase of Second Avenue increase substantially. And it is a project that's been in the books since 1930, so nobody's ever doubted that. So we just need to redouble our efforts to make sure that that commitment for the second phase of Second Avenue is realized as fast as we possibly can. Thank you.